Power is a drug and they feed the addiction. Immediate deletion of people's existence. Who says what isn't legitimate resistance? To push these buttons, you don't need a brave heart. State of the art darts leave more than your face scarred.
I'd like to make a couple of remarks. What you have to understand is that ever since the Soviet Union came into existence, as far as imperialism was concerned, although imperialists had contradictions with each other, they unitedly believed Soviet Union was their enemy, and they were right. So the cardinal faith was put in the attempts to exterminate the Soviet Union. And the war in Spain is something which is very important for every side. The fascists are supporting the fascists in Spain, and as has been indicated, the fascists even entry into Spain, Franco's entry, and of the 40,000 Moroccan troops is facilitated by the British, because all the time the attempt is somehow to get the fascists, to appease the fascists, and in the end turn them eastwards. I mean, it was known to British imperialism and to American imperialism and to French imperialism, the Germans as a rival imperialist power posed a danger to them. But all the time the attempt is, can you somehow accommodate them? Can you somehow accommodate their demands? Japan in the east and Germany and Italy in the west, can you accommodate them so that they all, from the Far East and from Europe, actually engulf the Soviet Union in an attack? And only this actually explains the attempt of the Soviet Union even to participate in the non-intervention committee. The Soviet Union perfectly understood that the purpose of the non-intervention committee was to actually aid the fascists. And the Soviet Union, by being there, was able to actually expose some of the machinations that went on, while at the same time knowing that the fascists and the imperialist powers, their backers, were actually aiding the fascists. The Soviet Union is organizing every kind of help for the Spanish Republic. So there's two things going on: participation in the non-intervention committee and the actual activity of both sides on the ground. And so there is an apparent contradiction. Whereas the Soviet Union participates in the non-intervention committee, every communist party is asking their government in West to leave the non-intervention committee and start aiding the Republicans. So you would think there was a real dispute going on between the Comintern on the one side and the Soviet Union on the other. Nothing of the kind. It's just different tactics adopted to suit the purposes. And once the Spanish Republic is defeated, then the stage moves further to center stage, if you like. And again, as the Germans, encouraged by their victories in Spain, then start taking over country after country. And Britain's and France's responses to appease the fascists, hence the Munich Agreement. At Munich, they surrendered certain districts of Czechoslovakia as a kind of down payment. You can have more if you would only move in the direction of the Soviet Union. But at least to begin with, the Hitlerites understood that the Soviet Union was a hard nut to crack. They lost that side, or maybe they came to a point where actually things could not be delayed anymore. So their purpose was to attack the Soviet Union last. And they were very successful in that. They took country after country. The country in Western Europe that was supposed to be the strongest was supposed to be France, with its Maginot Line. Now, by sheer luck, rather than by strategic planning, the Germans, who actually had, compared with the French, inferior forces, involved themselves in extremely mobile warfare. And within 2 weeks, the French fell and collapsed, partly, of course, by the fact that half the French ruling class was on the side of the fascists. It's very important and useful to have a fifth column. If you want to win against your opponents, the fact that some people are on your side, they're already there. The fifth column actually refers to the Trotskyites. Mussolini's general said that 4 of his columns were marching on Madrid and the 5th one was waiting there. And these were the Trotskyists of the Poon who were collaborating with them. That's where the word fifth column comes from. And after that, the fascist powers and the imperialist powers have always used a fifth column. Of course, once the Munich Agreement was signed, what does the Soviet Union do, which had been trying to coordinate an anti-fascist front with the various democracies of the world, Britain, America, France, etc. The Soviet Union turns the tables on these powers by concluding the non-aggression pact with Germany. Once the non-aggression pact was concluded, the Germans felt free to do whatever they liked. They were not worried about the Soviet Union anymore. So Hitlerites invade Poland, and thus forcing Britain to declare war. So all the plans that the British ruling class had laid to engulf the Soviet Union in a war single-handedly against the fascist powers came to naught. So the very people who were appeasing the fascists, the French, the British, had to actually face those fascist powers. The Soviet Union concluded during the war a similar pact with Japan, thus leaving Japan free to attack America at Pearl Harbor. So now Soviet Union was in a perfectly happy position. But the miscalculation of the Soviet Union, which is really not a miscalculation, which is just how it happened, is the total collapse of France so early in the war. If the French had fought as they were expected to fight, and the war had carried on for another year or so, the Soviet Union would have been in an even stronger position. Once the French had fallen, the Germans had become the masters of the western part of the European continent. They had to then decide whether to attack the Soviet Union or not. It was then or never. And they did. And when they did, as Topich says in his book Stalin's War, they'd opened a door behind which Stalin had some wicked plans against them. They did not know what they were attacking. And you know what the contribution of the Soviet Union was. So people who tried to appease the fascists in the interest of fight against communism had themselves to suffer. Churchill, Chamberlain, the lot who wanted to preserve the British Empire, and that was their main contact, ended up at the end of the Second World War by starting the process of losing the British Empire. They're trying to reconquer it now, but I'm afraid the world cannot be reconquered. You can defeat individual countries. You know, if the combined forces of imperialism defeat a population of 6 million after 8 months of saturation bombing, this really is not a victory. It's not a kind of example of heroism, of valor, if you like. But they have still not won in Libya, because Libyan resistance has been formed and is carrying on. You'll hear more and more about it. It's not something which is a figment of our imagination. So what you have to understand is Spanish Civil War is only a part of a struggle, on the one hand between the camp of socialism and imperialism, and on the other hand of inter-imperialist rivalry. And it ends up in the Holocaust of the Second World War, which claimed 50 million lives, wounded many more, and destroyed a whole lot of humanity's wealth. And the lesson for us to learn is not appeasement, but to fight against the force of imperialism. The lesson for us is of proletarian internationalism and not narrow nationalism. Just as the brigaders fought for the Spanish Republic, we have a duty to fight for the oppressed people which are under attack by our own ruling class. That, as Katt beautifully brought that point out and summarized it, that's very, very important for us. One final point. I have to express a disagreement, although it's got nothing to do with today's presentation. It's an alien matter I think Comrade Levy should not have introduced. I think 4 decades after the Cuban intervention in Angola, even to continue to maintain today that the Cuban intervention was wrong, they were, when everybody knows that without the Cuban intervention, the South African fascists would have won there, is nothing short of a shibboleth that is being carried on by a certain section of our movement who like to call themselves Maoists. Now, whether it is real Maoism, that is debatable, but I think it's wrong to denounce the Cubans for one of the most heroic things they've done. They put themselves on the line, they sent their soldiers and helped beat the fascists and their stooges in Angola, Savimbi's lot. Savimbi's lot are not a national liberation movement. Savimbi's lot were downright agents of imperialism and were kept going because they had occupied certain areas of Angola where there were diamonds, where there was oil, and they could sell those illegally and carry on that war, which claimed so many thousands of Angolan lives. I think we should drop that thing. If it's meant to be against Khrushchevite revisionism, it's just wrong kind of fight to wage against Khrushchevite revisionism. And there are many other crimes that Khrushchevite revisionism committed, but that's not one of them.
It's time to